Alright guys, today is the day that I will be going over the data from my first stock bottom end 4.8 record pass with you, and also showing a little bit of the progression up to that point. If you like this content, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you know when I release more like it. I'm making this video because we just passed 1,000 subs on the channel, so thank you to everyone for joining, and shout out to A21 Bravo for the last little boost to over 1,000. I linked his channel below, so be sure to check him out as well if you haven't already. I will not be going into great detail on the setup of the car in this video, but I have already made another video doing just that, which I will link here and also at the end of the video. I'm going to start about 6 months before setting the record. At this point I had been running the car for a couple months and was just starting to get things figured out. I have another video actually going over my first track day with the car as well, which I will link here. This day was my first time trying radios on the car, and this is also the day that I reached a couple of my goals for it. When I originally got with John Bewley to help spec the combo for the car, my goals were 850 or quicker and 165 miles per hour or faster. I also had the stretch goal of going 7s and beating the stock bottom end 4.8 record, but I wasn't expecting to make it that far. And another goal was to build a car fast enough that it could scare me. This pass was the first time that it ever did that, although the reason that it scared me was more the fact that it moved around so much, as you'll see by the shoot tail, than actually going fast, but it still did the job and it was a new personal best for me. I'm not going to show the data from this pass, but it was on the stock ECU still at this point, and I was running right around 26 pounds of boost. As you can see, the car went 847 at 163 miles per hour there. The reason that I chose to start there is because that was the first time that I really realized I could possibly go 7s with the car. I felt that I didn't really need to worry about the engine until over 30 pounds of boost, so I knew there was a lot of potential. I was kind of limited by high DA and not ideal track conditions though, so I knew I'd have to travel to make it happen. After that day, I ended up putting the car back on slicks and did some more no prep racing, and I continued to up the boost until eventually I maxed out my 3-bar operating system on the stock ECU. At that point I decided to put a Holley Dominator on the car and a 5-bar map sensor, and I also went ahead and installed the BTR Ultimate RPM spring kit so I could spin a little bit more RPM and run more boost without running into the end of the map on the ECU. And also I wanted to have the closed loop of the Holley and the much easier to use timing table, which goes by map instead of the grams per cylinder like the stock ECU does. And I also at that point decided that I was going to try to break the record at Texas 2K19 because I knew there was going to be great DA and great track prep there. About a month before Texas 2K, I decided to take the car to Extreme Raceway Park in Ferris, Texas, near Dallas, Texas. I wanted to push the car harder and get some data on a better surface and better air so I could be more prepared to shoot for the record at Texas 2K. I had never been more than a couple hours from home with the car, so it was definitely nerve-wracking going that far to test. I actually remember nearly throwing up on the way there. Once I made it to the track though, I was in race mode and good to go. It was a good thing I went because I actually ran into a big issue there. My differential couldn't quite keep up with the mid 1/260 foots and would just spin one tire. I did still manage a personal best on a pass where it did hold together though. My best before this outing was the first pass I showed you where I went 547 at 130 miles per hour in the 8th. At XRP I managed to drop that down to a 528 at 132 miles per hour. I was hoping for a little bit faster than that, but I knew this car still had more in it and was definitely capable of a 7-second pass. So here is the data log from that pass from XRP where I went 528 at 132 miles per hour. As you will see, the air-fuel ratio here is on E85 scale. I'm going to put up a little reference chart for you to see if you are just used to gas scale or lambda, so that'll help you figure that out a little bit easier. This is just what I was using at the time. I did end up moving over to gas scale even while I was still using E85 on the Holley, but it's just kind of a preference thing, and that's what I started with there. As you can see, I left right around 4,300 RPM and 11.5 pounds of boost. And if you follow this light green line here, you can see that the boost ramps in fairly quickly. And you can also see down here, if you follow this blue line, that the timing drops down fairly low. And then as you can see, the boost isn't changing that much, but the timing starts to go up here. So if you're wondering what that is all about, that is the timing following the RPM. So that is kind of the trick to keeping these stock bottom end motors alive, in my opinion, is keeping some of the timing out at the lower RPMs. Torque and cylinder pressure kind of follow right along with each other, and cylinder pressure is what is going to end up killing a stock bottom end motor, or really any motor. You could get to a limit of cylinder pressure typically, or you can also reach a limit of too high of RPM or something of that sort, of course. So with the stock bottom end stuff, in my opinion, it's kind of a balancing act between killing it with too much RPM and killing it with too much cylinder pressure. One way that you can easily kill it with cylinder pressure is actually detonation, because detonation is whenever you ignite the spark too early and it fights the piston as it's coming up, and it will cause extreme pressure spikes in the cylinder pressure, and that will very easily lift a head or bend a rod or break a piston or many other things. So that is something you definitely want to avoid, and that's kind of why my timing numbers are pretty conservative compared to most people's, just because I would much rather use boost to make power instead of timing, just in case I do happen to run into detonation from having a little bit too much timing, just trying to get right on the edge of the max amount of power I can make with timing. So anyways, we will dive right into this. As I said, left at 11.5 pounds of boost. We'll go to about half a second out. As you can see, we are already just under 24 pounds of boost here. You can see the timing was down at 9.4 degrees here, really low, down into the single digits even at that low of boost. Probably too conservative, but I would always like to start low and go from there. So anyways, we'll go a little bit farther out into the run. About 1.2 seconds is right about where it was at max boost. As you can see, 28.5 pounds of boost. It did come up a little bit more after that, but not much. Still, right around 9 degrees of timing there. Closed loop was not doing a whole lot there. I had the fuel map pretty close there, it looks like. Just over 29 pounds of boost here, and then you'll see right around here the timing actually starts to come up as the RPM comes up. So you see I'm at 6,000 RPM here. This is where I start to feed the timing back in. So you'll see it slowly comes up and it gets up to right around 6,800. That is where it kind of peaks out and holds timing there. So at this point I was just taking timing out up to 6750, and from that point on I was running the max amount of timing that I planned to run. So at this point I had it pretty conservative, 12.5 degrees of timing at just under 30 pounds of boost. I had actually ran it higher than this before. I actually made 1140 wheel horsepower on the dyno whenever I had my stock ECU still on 30 pounds of boost and 14 degrees of timing. So I did have it a little bit safer here. You'll also see as I start to get higher in the RPM, the closed loop starts to pull a little bit of fuel out. I hadn't quite been to that RPM yet, so it was a little bit rich there. I always tend to make the base map more on the rich side whenever I have not been to that point of the map yet. You'll see I shifted just over 8,400 RPM, and you'll see the timing drops right back down as it goes to 6250. It goes to 10 degrees of timing, and you'll see it slowly starts to raise back up, and it doesn't quite get back up to the full timing by the end of the track, just because this was only an 1/8 mile pass. I had a 373 gear in the car, so it also had a fairly tight converter to where it couldn't quite keep itself out of that range where I was pulling timing. After the outing at XRP, I took the car home and got a 31 spline spool ordered from Strange Engineering so I could hit it harder in the 60 foot and not have to worry about doing one tire fires anymore. It still amazes me that the 31 spline stuff held up to the abuse I put it through. I definitely should have had stronger parts, and I did end up upgrading after the record, but the 31 spline axles came out straight as can be with no issues. I got the spool installed and made the 12-hour trip down to Texas 2K19 with big goals, and once again was nearly sick from the nerves. I decided that I was going to start off right around where I left off, but a little bit more aggressive. I turned up the launch and was shooting for 30 psi down the track and expecting a low 8-second pass. Another interesting detail, the car was actually a no-time car up to this point, so very few people actually knew how fast it was and found out exactly what it was capable of on this pass watching the live stream of the event. Also, the wheelie the car did was definitely the coolest thing I had ever done in a car up to that point.
We wheels up for the Mustang. $819,163 for Jack Roberts.
Alright guys, so here we are on the 819 Datalog. As you just seen, it went a 12460 foot on the back tires actually, and you'll also see here in the dip in the TPS, this is where I pedaled a little bit for that wheelie. I couldn't see over the bump in the hood. I couldn't see the right wall, so I wasn't sure if I was moving over at all, so I decided better to be safe than sorry and pedaled it a little bit. You also see another dip right here. This one was actually, the car launched hard enough that I didn't quite have my foot planted on the throttle well enough that it pulled me back a little bit and pulled me off the throttle a little bit. But as you can see, I turned up the RPM about 100 RPM, and I was on quite a bit more boost than I was at XRP. I left at 4,400 RPM and 16.5 pounds of boost here. And also, if you remember from the last one, it was about 0.5 seconds into the run that I hit 24 pounds of boost. On this run, I was 0.28 seconds and I was already at 24 pounds of boost. And then it quickly went up from there towards 30 pounds of boost. 1.1 seconds into the run, right before I pedaled it, it was just under 30 pounds. And as you can see, still right in the 9 degrees range on the timing there. And there's a little bit of a skip in the log here, but you can see it dropped down a little bit of boost and dropped the TPS down to 43% whenever I pedaled it, and came right back up. And then that's right whenever it started to get up in the RPMs and the timing started to climb back up to peak timing. So as you can see, it slowly starts climbing. I get about 67.50, and that's where it's at. 12 degrees of timing, and it kind of holds right around there. Once again, still super conservative, just like it was at XRP. I shifted at about 80 here, and you'll also notice if you look down here at the air-fuel ratio, it actually has a spike where it went a little bit lean on the shift point. I believe that was actually a misfire. I should have had the plugs gapped a little bit tighter, but I don't think it actually made much of a difference at all in the pass. You'll also see this green line, it starts to drop here. That's the boost dropping down. The boost controller actually overshot a little bit, and it ended up correcting itself after I shifted to second gear. So that is why the 1/8 mile per hour was a little bit fast for the compared to the 1/4 mile per hour. But anyways, once again, the timing dropped down when I shifted, mid 9 degree range, and then slowly made its way up until about 67.50 once again, where it was up to about 13 degrees now because it was only 27 pounds of boost. And then we'll go over here and see I went through the traps just under 7,700 RPM. And you'll also see that I was running the car fairly rich as well. You can see I was targeting 7.3 air-fuel ratio, 7.2 there. 7.2 on the E85 scale, as I showed you earlier, is right around 1080 on the gas scale. I like to run it a little bit rich, partially because I did not open the ring gap up in this motor, as I have mentioned in my other video. So I feel like the richer air fuel would help keep the temps down in the cylinder to keep it from butting the rings. So that was part of why I did that, and also just for, you know, safety, and I wasn't trying to really push the limits of how much power I can make by leaning it out and adding a whole bunch of timing. After that 819 pass, I knew the record was within reach and decided that I was going to just make a Hail Mary pass and try to make it happen. I tied the front end down a little tighter since I had already had the strange front struts maxed out, and I added some timing and added quite a bit of CO2 as well. Unfortunately, I didn't get to make another pass that day and had to wait for the next morning. The next morning came around and my class was called to the lanes, so of course I got right up there ready to go. I ended up sitting in the lanes for a couple hours due to multiple oil downs and other issues causing delays. It definitely wasn't a great feeling waiting that long knowing I had the car turned up significantly and had no idea if it would hold together or scatter and possibly cause an accident. I did have an engine diaper, but there is still always that possibility when you're pushing these stock bottom end engines to 1200 plus horsepower. Finally, it was my time to go. I did my burnout. I lined up on that Jason Miller prep. I bumped in, and then I let off the button when that tree dropped. And whenever I got about 30 feet out, I knew that it was going to be a good pass because the front end stayed down and I wasn't going to have to pedal it for a wheelie or anything like that. I shifted to second at about 8,300 RPM, right around the 330 foot mark. And as soon as I shifted, I put my hand up on the parachute, ready to go, just waiting for something to explode, waiting to hear something go wrong so I could throw the chute and try and keep the car straight. But I managed to look down at some point after that as well at the dash to see just how much boost it was running, and I seen 35 pounds of boost on the dash, and it was pretty much at that point that I knew as long as it made it through the line, then I was going to be good, and it was probably going to set the record, if not be very close. There's very few words to describe the feeling of 170 miles per hour in a clapped out Fox body with a 140,000 mile 4.8 having 35 pounds of boost shoved into it, but puckering is definitely probably one of the most accurate ones.
No idea what the build is.
Did you just break a record?
Maybe.
You might have?
Yeah.
What'd you do?
I went 791.
791.
70.
And what's in it?
It's a stock bottom end 4.8 liter.
You don't have to lie to me.
Out of a 2005 Tahoe.
You're serious.
40,000 miles.
You're serious.
That's serious.
Stock bottom end 4.8. That's
Yeah.
the fastest one's ever gone in the world?
Yep.
Stock heads too.
Unported. Didn't even clean them out. Left the gunk in there. The 85 cleans them.
What else? What's the rest of the setup on the car?
It's twin S366s, just cast, basic turbos, and LJMS cam. LJMS did all the valve train and stuff like that. It's just head studs, simple stuff, typical stock bottom end build. No, I didn't gap the rings, didn't even look at them. Didn't look at the bearings.
You're making it sound like it's so easy to do sevens with one of these things. And this is just your, I really want to go fast in the quarter car, or what?
I just started tuning or whatever, and I wanted to learn on my own stuff instead of somebody else's. So.
Wait, so you just started tuning, your guinea pig is your own car,
Yeah.
and you just broke the stock bottom end 4.8 record.
Pretty much.
Well, hell yeah, man. Congrats, man. That's awesome. Hell yeah.
Alright guys, so here's that time slip in case you didn't get a good look at it, and once again huge thanks to 1320 Video for letting me use that clip from their video, and as I mentioned before, I did link their original video that clip came from in the description, so go check that out. So looking at the slip, it was a 118 60 foot, 328 to the 330, and 505 at 138 miles per hour to the 8th mile, and 791 with a 3 at 170 miles per hour to the quarter mile. As you may have noticed, I didn't have to look at my other monitor to see what that slip read. That's because I have that slip memorized, because that's how big of a deal it was to me, and still one of the coolest things I have ever done. So anyways, we'll jump right into the log. 4,400 RPM and 16 pounds of boost, just like the last pass whenever I left. And you'll see the first 3/10 of the second were roughly the same as well, 24 pounds of boost right there. However, after that, things quickly changed. As the other pass, it was 1.1 seconds that I hit 30 pounds of boost, and as you can see here, it was about 4/10 of a second into the pass that I was at 30 pounds already, and then it kind of peaked out around 34 pounds of boost, just over half a second. You can see the timing was down 8 to 9 degree range at that low RPM, right around 6,000 RPM. It's kind of where I was trying to keep the cylinder pressure and torque down low to try to keep the rods inside the motor as much as possible. And you will also notice down here that I actually had a fuel pressure drop. I was running 3 Walbro 450s, and I had a set of Bosch 210 injectors. I was on pump E85 at this time, and as you can see, I got to 86% duty cycle, and you can see the fuel pressure dropped down to 71 psi, and I was running 43 psi base pressure. So as you can see, 35 pounds of boost plus 43. It should have been much higher than that, but luckily I had the Holly, and I did have my base map a little bit rich, as I have in the other logs as well, so it corrected the little bit that it needed to and kept it from hurting itself and kept it from ruining the pass as well. So as you can see, it peaked just over 35 pounds of boost and held pretty well all the way through the pass. I dropped a little bit there at the end. You'll see I shifted just over 8,300 RPM, or actually 8,450, and dropped down to 6,400 RPM. So 2,000 RPM drop on the shift. That's definitely more than you want, but that was a little bit too tight of a converter and just kind of what I was stuck dealing with at the time. You also see, as I mentioned in the last log, there's a little jump there on the shift from the misfire from having the plugs not quite gap tight enough. Once again, don't think it hurt the pass that much though. And you can also see here the ignition timing is back down to 9 degrees here at 6,400 RPM, and you see it slowly starts to ramp back in as I start getting up in the higher RPMs here. And I will go ahead and go across there and show you. And you can also see it's 7.2 AFR, once again about 1080 on the gas scale, pretty rich, the same reason I mentioned in the last one. You can see 11 degrees, making its way up towards 12, just gets to 12 degrees, just over, and holds right around there for the rest of the pass. 34 pounds of boost, and I went through the traps just over 79.50, and that's pretty much it. Anyways, thanks again for 1,000 subscribers, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and hopefully you guys learned something. That's kind of the goal with all these, and I would really appreciate it if you made it this far and you haven't subscribed, to go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell. I will make more videos like this, and I also have my data log from my other record pass where I went 780 at 168 miles per hour and actually became the first stock bottom end 4.8 to break into the 4-second zone in the 8th mile. So I haven't decided whenever I am going to release that one, but I do have it. So if you guys like, share, subscribe, and really help me grow the channel, then I will release that, as well as many other data logs and future data logs from whenever I get my new car running. So once again, thank you guys, and I will see you guys in the next video.